Pokemon Champions is maybe the most important thing that has ever happened in competitive Pokemon history, and I have been hanging on to every single drop of news about this new release. And today I'm going to share that with you, including some information that we can intuit about the release date and the monetization model, but isn't yet confirmed. So, let's jump into it. Pokemon Champions is the competitive Pokemon battling game that was announced on Pokemon Day 2025 and will release sometime in 2026. It's made by Pokemon Works, which is a joint venture between the Pokemon Company and ILCA. ILCA is best known for making Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, and Pokemon Works itself has only released one game so far, which is a puzzle game called Pokemon Friends that released on mobile and on Switch. They also have taken over production on Pokemon Home, which is on mobile and on Switch, and this is all notable because Champions will also be on mobile and on Switch. And thankfully, it will be cross-platform. It's been described as a free-to-start game, and we also know that a Pokemon Champions starter pack bundle, as well as optional in-game items, will be available for purchase. We don't know what those are. The currency in the game is called Victory Points, or VP, and they can be gained from ranked battles and other places in-game. We're told that VP cannot be purchased directly, but I've played enough mobile games to know that there are ways around this. Notably, Pokemon Friends was also a free-to-start game and had a limit to the number of puzzles that you can solve per day, and the paid version removed that limit. Pokemon Champions might be similar, although I think limiting the number of ranked battles per day would be a really bad idea. If I had to guess, monetization will be related to this icon on the recruitment screen, and will probably make it easier or faster to obtain new Pokemon in order to build your teams. Recruiting Pokemon costs 1000 VP, and you get that Pokemon permanently. You can also trial recruit Pokemon once per day, in which case you can use that Pokemon for a week. And this icon on the summary screen tells you how many days you have left. You also cannot train Pokemon while they are on their trial period, although I am curious if that just means they're changing their stats, or if it also means you can't edit their moves at all either. We also don't know how the Pokemon are chosen, and if you can re-roll to try to find specific Pokemon that you might need on your team. Thankfully, you can also transfer Pokemon over from Pokemon Home into Champions, which should make it easier to get started if you are a seasoned competitor. You cannot transfer Pokemon obtained in Champions back to Pokemon Home. Also, we know that not all Pokemon will be in Champions to start, and of course you can only transfer Pokemon that are in Champions over from Pokemon Home. Here's a list of all the Pokemon that are confirmed to be in Champions so far from the 3 trailers that we've seen. Notably, the only not fully evolved Pokemon, or NFE, on this list is Pikachu, so I wonder if they will keep choosing which NFEs to be put in the game, or if they are going to scrap all of them entirely except for the iconic ones. We have seen Pokemon like Clefairy, Magmar, and Electabuzz have a lot of success in VGC, and I think it would be a shame if they all got removed, but I can also understand how it would be frustrating if I got shown a Sewaddle on my recruitment screen, so we'll see what they do there. It doesn't look like there is an option to evolve Pokemon on the menu, so I think the NFEs would also have to be curated. Once you obtain a Pokemon, you can train them using VP. It costs 100 VP to change an individual move, 200 to change a nature, and 400 to change an ability. You also have 66 points to allocate as additional stat points, each of which costs 2 VP. This is a replacement to the effort value system, where you had 510 points to allocate in multiples of 4, but not multiples of 8. That would give you either 65 or 66 additional points, depending on how you distributed them. Notably, there are 2 things that you can't edit. You can't increase a move's PP, and there is no way to edit IVs, at least from what we've seen so far. It looks like all the Pokemon you recruit have perfect 31 IVs, although we'll see if Pokemon transferred from home also have this trait. Given that the champion slogan seems to be bringing Pokemon battles to everyone, it seems like these changes are meant to simplify the introduction to competitive Pokemon, and I have a full video about why these are excellent changes and what the implications of them are that you should watch after this video. Also, you should subscribe and like and leave a comment if you're interested in hearing my personal Pokemon Champions wishlist, because Man, do I have a lot of thoughts about what this game should include. But I digress. All of that being said, the total cost to buy and train one Pokemon is 2,132 VP, which translates to 12,792 VP to train a full team from scratch. That's the number to keep in mind as we get details about how this game is monetized and how much VP you earn. We know that you earn VP from ranked battles, and the amount depends on the outcome of the battle. And one thing I've learned from Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Links and Master Duel is that if you can get currency for losing, you should expect bots on Ranked Ladder farming currency and selling accounts. So let's hope there are guardrails for that. We also know that both single and double battles will be in Champions, and that you can play ranked battles, casual battles, or private battles. Two things that they did not mention are a tournament mode or a spectator mode, which are right at the top of my wishlist for this game. The battles themselves seem to have a 10-minute your time, which is increased from the 7-minute timer that we have right now. The last time that we had the 10-minute timer was all the way back in 2017, when there was no overall match timer, and we would get stuck in Celesteela mirrors that would drag on for ages. A longer your time also makes it easier to stall matches to the in-game timer, and I thought 7 minutes felt like the sweet spot for that, and it hasn't changed from that number since 2019, so it is curious that they would change it now. Team preview is still 90 seconds, and while many people hoped for an in-game version of open team sheets that we use at tournaments, the trailer does not make it seem like that functionality exists. The other big change is that health bars now show percentages, so you no longer have to eyeball how much damage an attack did, and therefore the ever-present complaints about damage rolls will only get louder. We also see some new terminology in the game, with extremely effective and mostly ineffective describing a 4x weakness or resist. Maybe most importantly, we know the first regulation will include Mega Pokemon. Trainers will use the Omni Ring to Mega Evolve, and we're told other features will be added to the Omni Ring later. We also see a Dondozo Terrasilize in the trailer, and I would guess that Z-Moves and Dynamax will make a return at some point too. This opens the door for formats where multiples of these are included, and unlike the current relatively stale Regulation F, this gives Play Pokemon and the Pokemon Company the ability to constantly mix and match mechanics to give us fresh new formats every few months. A couple things I want to point out about potential metagames. The first is that we don't see any legendary or special Pokemon in the trailer, including ones that are normally VGC legal. I suspect they will be added to the game later, once we've rotated through a few formats and they want to spice things up a bit, but normally the start of a generation doesn't have any legendary Pokemon allowed like Regulation A back in the start of Scarlet and Violet. I also mentioned that you cannot PP max Pokemon anymore, which is especially relevant in restricted formats where you have powerful moves like Astral Barrage limited to 5 usages, which is a lot easier to stall out. This makes the ability Pressure far more viable, and many legendaries have that as an ability. Having actually stalled a Calyrex out of Astral Barrages with my Pressure Palkia back in 2022, this is an interaction that I am quite excited for. Although it also means that Eternatus stall gets even better, so maybe not, I don't know. And we actually talk a lot more about this specific change in our podcast episode a few weeks ago that I will link. But with that, let's talk about the release date. We know that Champions will be used at the World Championships in August, and they also say it will be used at events leading up to Worlds. Now, the last event of the season before Worlds is the North American Championships on June 12th, so the latest possible release date is probably in May, but we also were told that Regulation H will be used for battles from September to November 2025, and then, the important part, as well as the subsequent regulation from December until the launch of Pokemon Champions, which will be announced at a later date. That subsequent regulation is Regulation F, that we know will be used at tournaments through the end of March 2026. Therefore, Champions will probably be legal for tournaments starting on April 1st, just in times for Orlando and Querétaro regionals on April 4th weekend. The fastest turnaround time that we've had between the release of a new game and the first tournament in that game was the release of Sun and Moon, where there were only 2 weeks before release and the European Championships in the winter of 2016. And assuming all of that information is still correct and they haven't changed the timeline since saying that, I think the latest Champions could release is March 18th, giving us 2 weeks to prepare for Orlando Regionals. I should also mention that they noted that in certain regions, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet may be used for Championship Series events, which sucks for those regions. But there are 2 other dates to keep in mind. The first is that this year's European Championships end on February 15th, and there are often announcements at the closing ceremony. The second is that Pokemon Day is on February 27th, and there is always a Pokemon Presents on that day. A lot of people are speculating that Champions will come out on the 27th of February, and it just lines up so well with this timeline, and I personally would expect the release date to be announced at the closing ceremony of the European Championships, along with more information and another trailer about the game. Speaking of Pokemon Day, we are about a year behind the normal release schedule for a new generation of Pokemon games, and I would expect to see the newest generation come out in November of 2026, in which case this upcoming Pokemon Day would usually have the first promo for the new generation, which on one hand would mean a lot of people watch and would be made aware of the release of Pokemon Champions, assuming there is also a trailer or a release for Pokemon Champions on that day. But on the other hand, it would kind of suck if the Champions release was overshadowed by a new generation in terms of the news hype cycle, so I don't really know how to feel about that. Okay, so between recording and editing this video, we did get new news from Steven, who is a Pokemon employee, who is looking for creators who are interested in showing off Champions, which, 1, by the way, I would love to be a part of, but 2, this tweet is coming out now, which suggests a February release date, in my opinion. My friend Joe UX9 released a video suggesting Champions might come out in May or even later, but I think it would be weird to make this tweet now if Champions isn't coming out for another 4 months. To me, it really suggests it's coming out in the next couple months. Just another data point to consider, and with that, back to the original scripted video. Finally, I want to talk about this image. We see it in the background of the Pokemon Battle Stadium in the trailers, and it's prominently displayed on the Pokemon website as well, where it's called the Champ emblem, but it's actually mentioned nowhere, and I cannot decipher what that insignia is supposed to mean. So if you have any guesses about that, I would love it if you commented, because I cannot seem to figure out what this is. Finally, there are 30 boxes to store Pokemon in. These are the languages that the game will be playable in, and it's listed as 1 to 2 players, and that is everything that we know about Pokemon Champions. Thank you all for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe, and I would love to hit 10,000 subscribers with the release of Champions. That would make my entire year. Also, I want to know what your Champions wishlist looks like, because that way I can steal your ideas from my wishlist. Thank you to all my channel members. You guys are the best, and until next time, I will see you all later.